Good afternoon. This is Dr. Barbara Gast, and I welcome my GBS151 Introduction to Business students. This is session 6, meaning this is the 6th week of our class. We're now into Module 3. Module 3 is a focus on the enterprise, so we're looking at structure, we're looking at a business plan, the attitude or who reports to who, basically. So I thought I would go over a few things. We just held the office hours, and I think there's a couple things I just wanted to clarify, because this YouTube message will get to you faster than through the WebEx office hours report. So what I want to talk about in Module 3, we're now into chapters 4 and 5. Now I noticed, because we just finished Module 2 on Sunday, we have some of you that are not participating. And what we mean by that is you are not posting an answer to the discussion question. And some of you are not replying to others. There's this two-step process. It is not a distance learning where it's at your own speed. We have structure. So if you are missing, you're missing 20 points when you don't participate. And that's like taking a class on campus and never showing up in the classroom. It's unacceptable. So I just want to give you fair warning that while you were graded out with a 0 for this last module, I can't stress enough what our structure is. So let me just discuss it just briefly. So what we're doing is we're going to have the Module 3, we're now readings, chapter 4 and 5. You will answer the discussion question and you will reply to somebody else. Now, as a courtesy, because there's lots of things going on, I have given you a grace period into the second week, but that should not be your regular plan of action. That's a backup. This first week of our module, you should be reading and responding in the questions. It's like a dialogue that we're exchanging ideas, clarification of ideas or concepts as you read. So that's the first week. Next week, what I expect you to do, continue to read, and that you would do your quiz by Friday. And then on Sunday, you would do your paper. You can do it in advance anytime during the module. I've opened it up so you can do that. So we're just accommodating a lot of people's schedules, coming and going, but you can't ignore it, okay? Please pay attention to that. All right, so let's just talk about chapter 4, which is on structure. And then next week, I'll be talking about entrepreneurship and some of the things that comes with starting up a company. Structure is important. Structure can change because you have a new CEO, new board of directors, you want to take a company in a new direction, or you're just starting up new. Either way, there are reasons we need to understand who reports to who has the liability, there's financial, there's tax implications, so it's worth your attention. Now, most common, we certainly hear about sole proprietorship. You can start a business right now. Say, I'm making jewelry, and I'm just going to sell my products. I'm a sole proprietor, and you can list that company with the State of Arizona Corporation Commission. It's called the Arizona Corporation Commission, and pay a fee. You will have to announce what structure, who are the owners, the location, who's managing it, because it could be self-managing. It could be that you hire someone to manage it. And so that becomes a legal document, and you keep that up to date with the state. So the sole proprietorship is the easiest form, but the drawback to this is that if someone sues you, they could take your personal assets. So most owners want to have some protection. So then we move into the LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. And what that does for us is it gives us that protection, saying we now identify the assets and this is the company. And if you're suing someone, the individual owner or individual board members are not, they're protected unless there's willful dishonesty. There's some exceptions to that, but pretty much you're protecting yourself. The partnership is one that I've gone into, where two people come together. They usually are bringing something to the table. I would say this is where it falls down many times. In my case, I had contacts. I had I worked for a company, and I had lots of people that I knew. So I left the company, but I had a non-compete clause. That type of agreement means I agree not to compete with them for a period of time. Usually it's about a year, and that there may be a radius in that year. It might be I can talk to some of their customers if they're over 50 miles away, but that's identified in the agreement. I actually consulted an attorney to see if I could bypass that. Non-compete clauses are very hard to hold up in court. However, I was advised you could spend about $20,000 defending yourself to be able to opt out of it. So I just tried to comply. That's how I got into education and became more of an instructor. But I also continued with the partnership a year later. But my contacts weren't as strong because I was a year out of the business. And it did affect the partnership. I didn't have as much to bring to the table. Sometimes you have money that you can infuse in. There's something that pulls you together as a partnership. It is easy. I would say disagreements is one of the major things that I've run into with partnerships. You want to go in different directions. What happens to the assets? I like the structure in the sense of we decided how much the person who was doing the work, what percentage they would keep of the business, and what percentage what we call the house. The house in any businesses I've been involved with, when they hire in salespeople, for instance, that if you bring business in, that you might get a percentage of the business. And there's always a percentage that goes to the house for keeping the lights on, that type of thing. And most cases I've seen either 50-50 or 60-40, 60 going to the house. We structured it was 90-10. 90% went to the person who was doing the work and 10% to the house. And we worked out of our homes, had no fancy offices. So there's various ways that you can structure this. And then you can change it later when the business grows or changes direction. In corporations, this so you can move from the type of, when we're forming a corporation, we need to have someone advising us. It's no longer I can do whatever I want to do, but you need to have guidance through a board of directors that giving you structure. You also can look at the LLC, limited liability corporation, where the ownership is limited in the liability, meaning someone sues you, they're not going to look at your personal assets, it's the assets of the company. And you usually have insurance that covers that type of liability. You have to have a charter for your company. And when you're filing with the Arizona Corporation Commission, they will ask that charter to be attached. It talks about the structure of it. It talks about the cost of so the charter is very concerned about where you're located, what's your address, what's your name, what's the purpose. If you say, oh, well, we're just in the business of making money, it's not a good answer, because that's about greed. You want to have a higher purpose, and that you're good enough at it that you're making money. The type of stock, if you're offering that, you have investors. that are contributing to your operation, and what is the length of time that you plan to exist. You may or may not know. You can guess at that point. I have a handout I'll post that talks about, or it's a chart that I put together that identifies many of these structures and the advantages and disadvantages, and that might be very helpful to you in trying to make some comparisons. I will just talk briefly about the S corporation. It's important because the tax structure, it is more complicated. You probably need to have outside advisors and your accountants. It's just more complex. Nonprofit organization, not for profit. There is definitely a different structure between the not-for-profit and the for-profit, which is what I've been talking about. I've headed both types of structures. The not-for-profit doesn't mean there is no profit, but what we're basically saying is that the purpose is not to earn profits, it is to break even. And it also takes the focus away from profit to service, the service to the community. And so when you look at how we operate, there are a lot of similarities. We have goals, we have objectives that we want to monitor whether we're achieving those. However, you would not be taken over or forced out because you didn't make a profit by the very nature of it. So we also can have mergers and acquisitions. Many times that happens because you don't have the expertise. Mergers, I'm thinking of, we have American Airlines right now based, well, they have a hub now in Tempe. Previous to that, it was United Airlines, and prior to that was America West. So some of you may remember the old American West was a startup company that became very successful right out of Tempe. They merged several times because of the nature of the airline industry, to be more efficient. The profitability factor was there. And so these mergers have some complications. I've known people who worked for America West that went to United and then American. One of the things that stood out is that they each had unions, and the unions would not merge. And so you would have these cultures that would be kind of fighting between the two. It's about survival of jobs. A flight attendant or a flight attendant with America West would be under one union. When they merged eventually, let's say American Airlines, they still have the different unions representation in different pay schedules and different benefits. And the competition here, I thought, was kind of amazing. But you have flight attendants with one of my friends, my neighbor, who had 25 years experience, had a hard time bidding on contracts. So they could pick and choose which flights they might do. The more seniority you have, then you have a choice. You get the first choice. She was midway down. That meant there were people with 30, 40 years experience. And so trying to push out some. And I imagine right now this is a really, really tough time with the airline industry, since people are not flying and they're beginning to lay off a number of people. So the structure with these mergers, you're not hearing so much about mergers right now because they're just trying to survive. Maybe we'll see more as we get a little more solid. Tough times. But that also proves what we're made of. So the structure of an organization is important. It is not cast in stone. We can change it. One of the things you will notice, if the strategy changes in an organization, the structure needs to be re-examined whether that's the right structure to get where you want to go. All right, that's enough about that. I won't do a long one. It's 15 minutes, just enough to whet your curiosity. Next week, we'll talk about entrepreneurship. All right. Hope the day treats you well, and I'll talk to you again.